And I would love to welcome on stage Shruti Aggarwal as she shares about building sustainable wealth in today's economy. Welcome on stage.
I hope we're all learning, all enjoying. Rebecca and Tommy have shared such powerful insights here. I'm sure I can only add a little bit to what they've said. Christine, I will not take a lot of time. I know we all are hungry here, but I'll start. My name is Shruti Aggarwal. I am the CEO of one of the largest power plants in Rwanda. And I am actually a finance professional who's moved on now to the energy sector, heading this huge plant that's based in Gisenyi, excuse me. During my days, I generally spend some time on the plant. I keep traveling to Gisenyi, but during my evenings, alongside spending time with my family, I actually also talk a lot about finance, capital, cash flows, considering I do come from the finance background. But it's not only the finance background that I'm going to speak about, but one thing that I've taken away, the correlation between the energy sector and the finance sector and building wealth, is that building wealth takes decades. Okay, thank you. Building wealth takes decades. It's not super quick. And it is somewhat related to how the energy sector is, where we also have agreements that run into decades. The plant that I head at the moment has an agreement with the government of Rwanda to head it for 25 years. So there is somewhat of a correlation here. But something along wealth that I want to speak about is a few years ago, something happened which actually challenged how I speak about wealth. And how I actually think about wealth as well. I met two women, and this was actually at the airport, very strong women, not very close to me. They became closer later on, but both incredible, highly educated, working full-time. But there were two very stark differences. One was a senior professional who was in a 9-to-5 job, earning good amounts of money, respected in her organization. The other was an entrepreneur, running her own business, taking risks, building something of her own. Later on, I went on to ask them when they became friends as well. On the surface of it, you would think that both of them are doing well, they're in the good path of building wealth. But actually, when I sat down with them and asked them, what exactly is your net worth? Obviously, you would be taken back. Not everyone likes to answer that question. But one of them actually did not know what their net worth was. And one of them avoided the question. And it's not because they were not intelligent or they were not hardworking. But I think it was also, a lot of us women here are sometimes never taught about how to think about money, how to compound that money. And I think Tommy is a great example of that. She spoke very well on that. One was earning so well, but spending unconsciously. The other one was earning well, but just keeping that, generating that income, but not building on it. And in that moment, that is when you start to realize that it's not income that actually generates wealth. Sometimes it's also awareness. It's also collaboration, like Tommy has just spoken. It's also thinking about the money. A lot of the pointers given by Rebecca, it's also that psychology of money that we all need to think about. Today, across the world, across Africa, and the background that I come from, ethnically an Indian, grown up in Africa, now a British, but global person. But a lot of the women are earning a lot more than the men are. I'm an example of that. Certain months, certain times of the year, I earn a lot more than my husband in a 9-to-5 job versus my husband who's an entrepreneur. So if we don't change about what we think about money, we will continue to work hard, but we're never going to be financially free. We've got to be very intentional about it. We've got to be very conscious about it. So I'm not just going to talk about making money, but it's also sustainable wealth. I think Rebecca or Tommy, one of them said, money is not just financial, it's also emotional. It's the way we spend, the way we save, the way we take risks, and sometimes also there are times that you do not make logical decisions because it becomes emotional. They're shaped by fear, upbringing, culture, especially for us women, and a lot of guilt as well. I think we're all aware of that. So I want to speak a little bit on conscious financial management. How many of us here have actually grown up in families where money was carefully managed, especially, raise your hand, how many of your parents, especially mothers, could stretch every single dollar further than you've ever thought possible? I think everything, and I'll say this, everything I know about money today is not specifically from the boardroom. I have learned from boardrooms, but it started from my mother. It came from my mother. She had a very simple philosophy. My mother used to, just to put this into perspective, my mom was a teacher. She worked for a number of years, a biology and a maths teacher, but later on moved on to being a housewife, just to ensure that her kids were raised as they are, financially independent at the moment. I have 2 elder brothers and myself who are equally financially independent and doing well. She was not an investor. She never spoke about returns or markets. She did not know finance. But the one thing that I've understood from her is actually discipline. The smallest of the things, and I think this is in our daily lives as well, the smallest of the things, buying things from wholesalers versus retailers. I'm not sure how many of us do that, but that saves us a lot of money, you know? So it's, as kids, we just never questioned what mom did, but we just knew how things were done. And I'm sure another example actually of this is recycling food as well. A lot of us have food that is left over, let's say, on a night, and then you eat it the next day. But that also adds up to saving. At the end of the day, it also has a financial impact. So no matter how small your income is, one thing I would always remember from my mom is save something. I do not come from a poor family, but I come from a middle-class family, an okay family. And what I remember was that we never went to expensive restaurants when we grew up. Not that we didn't want to, but it was just considered unnecessary spending. It was not required. And at times, it was not even an option. And I still remember a very simple example that the first microwave in our house came from my brother's salary, who was a year older than I am. So it was the little things, it was the little saving, it was the little investment that we learned from our mother that we've grown up to be this way. And all I can say is that wealth is not built when income increases. It is built when there is discipline, when habits are formed. Many of us are trying to learn investing. Many of us, including myself, are trying to learn financial products, strategies, trying to become, like Tommy is here, a very good example, inspiring people. But the foundation of wealth, I think, is very simple. Spend within your means. Avoid what you don't need to spend on. And that is where the starting happens. So, like I've said it before, long before I understood capital markets, the first thing I understood was discipline. I never knew when I was 6 years old, 7 years old, that I was going to be an accountant. I ended up becoming an accountant, now entering boardrooms. But all of this has come from my mother, and a little bit from my cultural background as well, being from an Indian family household. But I wanted to contrast this with something that I see a lot today. We see many successful entrepreneurs, senior executives earning very well on paper, looking very perfect. But when you look closer, a lot of them do not have real assets. They do not have structured investments either. And very little savings. The income is high, but the lifestyle is even higher. And I think we see that in the room as well at times. Not only that, outside the room as well. Expensive habits that grow quietly over time, but the problem is not spending, it's the unconscious spending. So what you end up with is a very dangerous gap between how successful and the whole fancy picture, how someone looks, versus how financially secure they are. And that's when it really hits you that it's the discipline that really matters more than the income. And again, bringing it to my mother, because the difference there between my mother and many high earners today, it's simply the behavior. It's simply the discipline. And that's why we say that conscious financial management, it's not optional. It's essential if you want to build real sustainable wealth. It's not accidental, it is designed. There are 3 things every woman here should be knowing, and some of which Tommy has already spoken about. Know your numbers. If you don't know your income, expenses, and net worth, you're not managing your money. So that's the basics of it, what you're earning. Be intentional about it. Every dollar you earn must have a purpose, and be consistent about it. You don't build wealth in one moment. It takes time. You build it quietly over time. The other point that I want to touch on is being in a 9-to-5 job versus being an entrepreneur. A lot of us think that being entrepreneurial is all about money. And I would like to actually challenge this myth. I am not an entrepreneur. I have been in a 9-to-5 job for the last 2 decades. And I am comfortable. I know many entrepreneurs that actually earn a lot, but they don't keep a lot. They end up spending that. So that volatility that you get in being an entrepreneur versus the discipline that you have in a 9-to-5 job is important. I think in a lot of the talks that we enter these days, a lot of the people talk about being an entrepreneur and being successful. I'm glad Tommy brought about the fact, and someone asked that question as to what was the most difficult thing, and she's spoken about it. I think we hear a lot of success stories, and we don't hear a lot of the failure stories. So the perception is very skewed towards being an entrepreneur and not being in a 9-to-5 job. I have a lot of friends who are in 9-to-5 jobs, making, if not in 6 to 7 figures as well. Sometimes in Africa, sometimes outside Africa. So let's challenge that myth. If you don't want to be an entrepreneur, don't force yourself to be an entrepreneur. You can be in a 9-to-5 job and be comfortable and do well. And be stable on that. The other thing is understanding the difference between saving, investing, income, and your assets. If you only earn and you don't invest, I think Rebecca spoke about it, inflation is only making you poorer every day. The other thing I want to touch on is how are we passing on what we are learning to the next generation? It's not very complicated. Children and their early habits. And that is where the whole sustainability of wealth also starts. You don't need to start when you're 30 or when you're 40. It starts when you are a child, like it did with me to an extent. But if we teach our children how to save, we can change an entire generation. And I'll give you a very personal example of that. And someone sitting here knows my daughter here that is 8 years old, Deborah here. My daughter, 8 years old, very opinionated, very outspoken. You've got to control her sometimes. But there are other times that I'm happy she is that way. But we've also raised her that way. Bringing this to the financial literacy side of, so we've done something very simple to take this on to the next generation. We've opened a bank account for her. She's 8 years old. We've opened a bank account for her. And For that 8-year-old, you're actually allowed to have a debit card as well. She was all fancy. She went out and ordered a pink or a purple debit card for her and wrote her name there. But what we did, apart from the fancy side, what we did was we intentionally deposit money into that account. The money which we have access to, she obviously does not know how to operate that. But there are days we give her out that debit card. When we're going out for dinner once in a while, I'm not saying every day. Or when you're going out to supermarkets, and I'm like, you're going to pay for our dinner today. And she'll tell me, Mommy, I'm not going to pay for it. And I'm like, but why? Because I want to save. So she's learning that. It's not only that, when you go out to supermarkets, instead of buying 4 things, if she's buying a chocolate, she'd be like, I don't want to buy more. I will keep this because otherwise my bank balance goes down. And she understands that. She goes out to my husband's business as well once in a while. She knows how to deposit checks. She knows where money comes from. And she knows how the parents are investing in her to learn that it is from this age that the children learn. It is not when you start earning your first salary. Children can learn, you can make them save, you can make them be conscious about their spending. I'm not teaching her to be stingy, by the way, but she's learning to be conscious about it. And then the other point is, which Tommy touched on, is also your support systems around you. How many of you think that you've built your careers on your own? Barely any. And that's because none of us can do this alone. Behind every successful woman, and I'm not going to quote the normal quote, there's always a support system. Apart from a progressive man, a progressive father, or a husband, there is a support system around them. And I think we should all take advantage of these support systems, collaborate, like Tommy has mentioned. Reach out to your friends who you think can pass on that knowledge to you as to how to invest so that your wealth is growing sustainably. And this is something we don't talk about enough, because we celebrate independence, but it is also, which is critical, but it is also important that we don't underestimate our ecosystems that much. Success is never individual. It's built on the strength of the support system around you. And this was said by the PepsiCo CEO, Indra Nooyi. And I will say this very clearly, financial independence is important, but sustainable success is almost always collective. Now, I think we should all reach out to the women that are sitting around you. How many of you are building that collective support ecosystem around you? Because the real progress is not when one woman succeeds. Tommy mentioned this. It's when she creates the conditions for many more to succeed. And she's a great example of allowing other women to succeed. The 40 women out of the 250 that came in, she's a great example of that. And I think we need to build these support systems, talk to women around you. It's not always about, I think Irma mentioned it, it's not always about looking pretty, but it's also about creating that sustainable wealth, making sure we're not dependent on anyone. And the last point I'll touch on is our biological versus our career clocks. Men plan their careers. Women don't just plan careers, we plan lives at the same time. And that comes with a lot of complexity. We are all aware, career growth, family decisions, time, energy, and which is why financial planning for women especially should start a lot earlier, and it should be a lot more intentional. A few examples, which I think a lot of us women in the room have gone through, is a promotion versus a motherhood. I've gone through it at least. Imagine you're up for a major promotion, a leadership role, which is going to give you more visibility, a bigger responsibility, but at the same time, you're also thinking, is it also the time for me to start a family? And what happens then? You start thinking, biologically, your time is not unlimited. But again, professionally, it is your acceleration window as well. And that is something, that is a challenge that can delay your promotion. I still remember when my firstborn came and I had to step down. I've also moved countries after getting married, stepped down in the roles from being a group CFO to middle management, and then again moved on to being a CEO. So all of these things do affect, even when you take a career break, a 2 to 3 year penalty. When you return, you're somehow behind in seniority, and I think we've all faced that. A lot of us have faced that, behind in compensation, and sometimes even behind in confidence, whether that comes with the way you look or whether that's because you've taken a break. The career clock pauses, but the market doesn't. And how this relates to financial impact is, if you take a career break, it's not just income you lose also your savings momentum, because there is that income that's not coming through. When you lose that, you're losing that investment compounding, your retirement contributions. The cost of that decision, it's not just today, it's your future wealth. And that is why I say we need to be very much intentional. We need to act early to ensure that these small decisions compound, that for your rainy days or for the breaks that we take, we have the income or the financial independence that we need. Because career and personal life for us women can be pulling us in different directions. It happens. A lot of us go through it. And coming from that is also financial independence is not linear either. Because of the career breaks that we have, there are many setbacks that we face. But I think what matters today is the direction and not necessarily perfection. You need to have a goal as to where you want to reach, have a vision as to where you want to be. Start small. You can always grow to the level where you want to be. You can achieve that goal. You've got to have the courage to accept that you can achieve that. So I'm going to leave you with this. Sustainable wealth is not about chasing money. It's about building a life where money no longer controls your choices. Be intentional, invest early, design your life, because we don't just need more women earning. We need more women building wealth. Before I close, I want to leave you with a story. A few years ago, I actually met a young girl, not more than the age, probably somewhere around the age of my daughter, sitting with her mother when we are talking about finances, having good conversations, and she just paused and she actually turned around and asked me, why does my mom always have to ask my father before spending? And an innocent question, but it carried something very much deeper. Who controls the money? Who controls your choices? And in that moment is when you realize it's not just about us. We are being watched. The next generation is watching us. It is being learned. It is being passed on. Every decision we make today, every conversation we avoid, every risk we don't take, it shapes the next generation. That little girl will grow up one day and she will either ask for permission or she will make her own choices. And the difference between those two futures is financial awareness. So when we talk about building wealth, we're not talking about money, we're talking about freedom, we're talking about dignity and about choice. And we're talking about changing that story, not just for ourselves, but for every girl that's watching us. And on that note, I will say thank you, everyone. I know we're all hungry for lunch, but I'm happy to take a few other questions that you may have.
Ikibazo cya mbere nagira ngo nkubaze impamvu waje kuinvestinga mu Rwanda. Ni igiki cyabiguteye? Ni iki wumva, ni gute wumva business yawe izakugumya kubona cash flow nkuko abiteguye? Ikindi kibazo ni ikintu nari mfite nashatse kubaza kare, ariko kubera ikiganiro watugejejeho numvishe nta kikubaza. hano tugira ikibazo cyane numvishe unimariye cyane cyane kijyanye na cash flow. Ndibaza niba hari business zakomeza kugira cash flow cyangwa izindi zitagira cash flow, amafaranga ushobora kugumana ubona uvuga uti iki gihe ninjiza amafaranga. Nayibonye cyane mu butaka cyangwa mu mazu, ukaba ushobora kuba wavuga uti byibura mfite amafaranga, cyane cyane nk'ababyeyi bashaka kwita ku muryango wabo bikaba byadufasha. Ariko ugasanga bibabaje cyane ku buryo abantu benshi bafungura business ugasanga bari ku gishoro cyabo barakibuze, bari kwikoramo. Mfite example cyane y'umushiti wanjye turi kumwe hano, twaganiriye nijoro ambwira uburyo yafunguye farumasi ariko ugasanga ari kwikora mu gishoro cye. Nkibaza ni iki umuntu yakora kugira ngo ashobore kubona iyo cash flow ihoraho, cyangwa hari business zikwiye kubona cash flow n'izindi zidafite kubona cash flow bidasabye investment nini kugira ngo tubone ayo mafaranga ahoraho. Uburyo nshobora kuvuga uti ndagiye ndi muri iki kintu ariko iyi business yanjye ishobora kuraninga paka n'abana banjye bakaba bashobora kuba bageraho iyo access. Murakoze cyane.
Thank you very much. So her first question, she is asking you, why did you choose to come and invest in Rwanda? Are you, how sure are you that your business is going to grow here and you'll be able to generate enough cash flow? That was her first question. And her second question, she's asking about still the cash flow, but it's more of a personal question, like especially for women. She started by saying she heard that you mentioned that you're a mother, you're a married woman, and she has seen a problem, an issue of cash flow. Let's say a woman can invest, and she shares a short story of her friend who invested and started a pharmacy, but she's always struggling. She made a big step, she made an investment, but how can we invest, but on the other hand, have a sort of a business that can keep generating the cash flow?
Okay, I'll take the second one first. And you'll probably translate that for me. I'm not sure. And this is more related to entrepreneurship versus the 9-to-5 myth that I'm trying to say. I invest, and a lot of my friends invest, but it all depends on your risk profile. So that conscious investment that you're making, you've got to make sure you invest, but it doesn't affect your daily life in such a way that you do reach a struggling stage. So go ahead, invest, but be careful about it, be conscious about it, is what I would say to that. And also, entrepreneurs take time. Building a business is not a one-day job. It's not even sometimes a year's job. It sometimes takes a number of years. So if she's struggling today, she's got to change something in that business so that she can make it successful in a couple of years. There are always teething problems in every business. And I may not be the best person because I'm not a businesswoman as much as I lead a business, but I'm not the owner of that business. I'm in a 9-to-5 job. I lead a very good job. And that's the advice I can give, that you will need to have the patience if you want to be an entrepreneur, because returns being an entrepreneur are very volatile versus in a 9-to-5 job when they're very stable. The first question was, I think she asked me, why did we choose to come and invest in Rwanda? This is more at a country level. It has got to do with women empowerment as well. My husband decided to invest in Rwanda, not myself. I was called into a job that was already here, my investor who was already here. Main reasons for that, Rwanda is one of the fastest growing economies of the world. It is a booming country. Even when you look at where Rwanda is today versus where it was, for example, 10 years back, or even the journey that Rwanda has taken from 30 years to now, whether it be women empowerment, whether it be digitalization of the economy, the rules, the systems, it's a very systematic country. You know that. As opposed to a lot of other African countries where sometimes the ease of doing business is not as easy as is here. And that was the reason for choosing Rwanda.
In your 9 to 5, you shared that you've been investing. What kind of portfolios have you been investing in that do not require that strain? Then my other question is, I like how you shared about your background, where you came from. For me, it was my dad. But it also gave me that, it also gave me, I feel like it gave me a bit of a scarcity mindset, because we were also middle class, but it was always like, there's no money, there's no money, there's no money. And he's an entrepreneur, but he said it, I think, from a place of, teaching us how to save, teaching us how to not waste. But how do I then pass it on to my children? I'm trying to teach them to save, but from an abundance mindset, not just, we don't have money, we don't have. Like he has done well for himself, he has invested in different things, but it also gave me that kind of scarcity mindset, and I find myself trying not to pass it on in, we don't have, but come from how do we strike that balance of creating those disciplines, but from an abundance mindset? Thank you.
I keep passing this on to my kids. I have an 8-year-old and a 3-year-old. We've not told them we're poor. We've not told them we're rich. We are comfortable. But what they need to understand is the value of it. Today, for the smallest of the things, if there's a light bulb switched on in a room where no one is sitting and your child doesn't switch it off, you're losing electricity, and I think we all know how high the prices of electricity are these days. But that's also losing the money. It's the simplest of the things like that. Only take what you can consume. It's the littlest of the examples. A very classic example of this is, and I'll talk about air travel. We've all traveled economy class. Some of us have traveled business class as well. There was a time when I couldn't afford business class. And my kids used to travel economy only. Even now, there are times that I can't afford business class. But my kids have seen business class. Now, what we are trying to teach them from there is that is what you need to aspire to be. And it's not us who are going to do it. It's you who's going to do it. You can start doing it now, rather than waiting to get your job as well. And that is what is a balance that we're trying to build. I'm not sure if that answers your question. Yeah. Sorry, what was your first question? Oh, right, okay. The portfolios. So my portfolios are very actually similar to what Tomi has mentioned. I do invest in Rwanda as well. It's not that I don't. But my portfolios are very diversified. Into real estate, into mutual funds, into stocks. I'm not an angel investor. Maybe that'll come soon. But I have more or less, my portfolio sits around those areas where it is still very, very highly regulated. That also comes from the amount of risk that I'm ready to take, considering my risk profile at the moment, considering what I'm earning or us as a family are earning. But we've made sure that our income doesn't come from one stream, or even my income alone doesn't come from my 9-to-5 job. There are dividends we earn. There is interest we earn as well. So that's the kind of portfolio we look at. There's rental income we earn as well. So you're not heavily dependent, I would say, on one source, which is, in my case, my 9-to-5 job. Yeah. Oh.
Yes, thank you so much for sharing your experience. I can't quote you enough, but one thing stuck with me women getting promotions and the personal life. Since we are in a room of only women, can we use your experience or even other women in the room to actually think? My question is, I have a friend, I think Rebecca told us, don't use your story if you're worried. So let me use my friend. She's in her 40s, and she was telling me how if she looks around her, most of her female friends are divorced, and they are really building wealth. So my question is, how can you build generational wealth and generational healing? Because we don't want to be also women who are only building bank accounts, having portfolio everywhere, but marriage fail, motherhood is hard. Like what can we do so that it goes hand in hand?
I'm not here to personally give advice on the generational healing side of it, but the generational wealth side of it I can speak on a little bit. A lot of which I've already spoken about. A lot of us talk about the work-life balance, first of all. I don't think that even exists. There's nothing like that. You're always sacrificing something or the other here and there. Coming to the fact of promotions versus your biological clock versus your life. I really think if you've proven yourself, you will get it back. It's not that you will not get it back, but not only that, if you don't get it as well, get up and do it again. You will face failures. It's not that you will not. Even in terms of wealth, there are a lot of investments you'll make. I've made investments where I've made losses. And I think Tomi spoke about her investments that she's made losses as well. We do make losses. It's not that you don't. But what happens is when you move forward, you learn from them and try and see that you don't try and invest in such kind or where, for example, legal structures are not correct and you're losing that kind of money. Or you research enough before you before you try and invest in there. In terms of generational wealth, how to pass it on to a generation is only how to, if all of us just picked up one child, even the ones, for example, a lot of women or men who don't have kids as well, pick up one child, mentor them about wealth, you are ultimately passing it on to the next generation, and you will be building that wealth. That's what I can tell you. We do that sometimes, and this is, I don't do that alone, I do that with my husband, is to educate younger kids. And this is younger kids from within our sector. We sometimes pick up a few kids and would be like, you know what, if we can try and tell them a little bit, and these are not long talks. You can even have 5-minute, 10-minute talks with them. Or not only that, your friends' kids, whose parents are, for example, not able to educate the child in terms of the financial literacy that they're supposed to have. Give them the advice, give them the mentorship. That's how you're building the next generation. I've had 2 young women that actually just came in last week, Friday. Both of them studying at a very good university in Dubai. And they came over for career advice. And they're like, we want to be successful, we want to earn that wealth. But I'm like, but what is your goal? What are you doing about it now? And they didn't have an answer to it. Or what have your parents told you about it? And it was a very wishy-washy answer. So even if you can go out to your friends and educate their kids to an extent, give them that knowledge, pass on that knowledge, that's the wealth that you're building.
Thank you so much.
She had a question.
We're taking the last question from her.
First of all, thank you so much. This is really amazing. My question was really around what she asked was around the career growth. We know that in mostly male-dominated fields and mostly leadership roles are being taken by men. And I wanted to understand setup, habits, things, systems that you put in place for yourselves to help you grow, and work ethics. I know that since you're not from Rwanda, maybe work ethics can
I've
also...
been in Rwanda now for 12 years.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, great. Yeah, I'm Rwandan. I've worked away. Yeah, I've worked abroad for over 15 years, and as patriotic as I am, I know that work ethics in different places can be hard to navigate, which also can impact the growth of your career. So I wanted to understand, what is it that you've put in place that helped you to grow in your career?
Focus. It's a very strong word, but and that also that mindset, learning never stops. The other mindset is a lot of things that help me is putting your ego behind. There will be men or women that may try to suppress you when you're going through your, your family journey or your motherhood journey. Not only suppress you, maybe, try to make you feel a little inferior. That's fine, but what are you learning from there as well? What are those guys doing that they are sometimes at that stage and you're not? The little learnings do help. Be conscious about the network that you have. For me, my network helped me a lot. We have friends who constantly motivate you or educate you about the sector that you can probably try and get into. I've been in the financial services sector, I've been in the FMCG sector, and for the last about 7 to 8 years, I've been now in the energy sector. Learn from them what they're telling you. So it doesn't stop, if I may put it that way. Even sometimes younger kids in their innocence do pass on information to you or knowledge to you. So it's that conscious mindset. And also, there's one more thing I want to speak on is you sometimes have to sacrifice your social life. I have done that many times. If you're trying to study, because when you're studying, I still am till date, if you're studying, you've got to, where that course or program, even if it's an executive education program, where it'll take you. But it will not, if you sit there and do nothing about it, you're not going to learn, you're not going to move up the ladder. So it's just the focus, the dedication, that has helped me a lot. The network has helped me a lot as well. And I can very strongly say I have a very supportive partner who helps me a lot. Deborah is very much aware of it. Who helps me take care of the kids when I'm away traveling. I think a lot of us have supportive partners like that. So be very intentional in who you're mingling with. Be very intentional about your network. And get the takeaways from there. Focus on that. And that's how you build yourself. I have grown up in Zambia. That's why I said I come from many different places. But I got married and moved here. My husband was based here, and I moved here. I was the group CFO at that time of a company actually a group of companies which held about 23 companies in their portfolio, and which had a very large manufacturing plant, a limestone manufacturing plant, a lot others. I was the group CFO of that company. When I moved here, I moved on to being a finance manager. And this is after about 12, 13 years in my career. I moved on to being a finance manager. at a pay scale of almost 4 times less. But it is the dedication that helps you. Keep at it. Keep at it. It will pay off. It will pay off.
Wow.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Shruti.
Thank you.
So I see you carrying up to